It's doing too much without planning and getting all your documents in order is what people do with business. They kind of jump in and try to do too much too soon without necessary planning and preparation. So like, for instance, you should always have, before you do anything else, you should always have a written business plan that talks about what your business is, what your goals are, how you're going to do things, what kind of business organization you're going to have, all kinds of, it should all be in that plan, which is like a roadmap.
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
Let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Matthew Fornaro has been a business law attorney in South Florida since 2003, specializing in complex commercial litigation, including contract disputes. He has a wealth of experience in construction law, intellectual property law, and representing homeowner and condominium associations. Additionally, Matthew provides legal assistance for business formation, drafting, and revising critical business documents. Before starting his own firm, he worked at two prestigious AmLaw 200 firms. As a mentor, he supports new attorneys through his involvement with the Kauffman Foundation's Fast Track New Venture Program and the Florida State University College of Business Jim Moran Institute for Global Entrepreneurship. He also advises small business owners in navigating legal challenges from compliance to litigation. You can learn from him how to proactively handle legal challenges from business formation to contract drafting and the steps you can take to avoid litigation and how to protect your intellectual property. So Matthew, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Candy. Thank you for having me.
Well, I know this is an important topic for business owners to really understand and apply to their business. But before I get into questions I have on the topic, I would love for you just to share a little bit more about how you became an attorney and a mentor to other attorneys.
Sure. So growing up, I was always into like the People's Court and like TV shows like that, not like Law and Order or anything like that, but like People's Court, The Judge, things like that. So I kind of always knew I wanted to be an attorney. So I went to undergrad and I took political science, which the only thing you can do is either work in Washington or be an attorney. So I went to law school. I focused in law school actually on intellectual property, and I got a certificate in intellectual property in addition to my law degree. And then when I came out, I worked for what would be called like a boutique law firm in Boca Raton doing business litigation. And then I wanted to work at a big firm. So I worked at two big AmLaw 200 law firms doing a lot of commercial litigation and a lot of civil litigation and things like that, representing big businesses and banks and insurance companies and things like that. And then it came to like a fork in the road in my career, or at least a pivot point. And then I was either going to work for an even bigger law firm or go out and do my own thing. So I chose to do my own thing. And I wanted to focus on helping small and medium-sized businesses because growing up, my dad had his own business and he was a small business owner. And I saw, I don't want to say the struggles, but the issues that he dealt with from a legal perspective and from needing like a competent attorney perspective. So I wanted to kind of fill that gap and help people like my dad. So that's how I got to being an attorney, and that's how I got to helping small and medium-sized businesses.
Perfect. Well, I know when a lot of people are starting businesses, they really don't know what they should be doing or what they shouldn't be doing. So can you touch on maybe some of the most common legal mistakes that they make when they are starting their businesses, and what can they do to avoid them?
Sure. It's, it doesn't matter, I'm in Florida. It doesn't really matter where you're located. A lot of the same mistakes are across the country and actually across the world for the most part. It's doing too much without planning and getting all your documents in order is what people do with business. They kind of jump in and try to do too much too soon without necessary planning and preparation. So like, for instance, you should always have, before you do anything else, you should always have a written business plan that talks about what your business is, what your goals are, how you're going to do things, what kind of business organization. You're going to have all kinds of, it should all be in that plan, which is like a roadmap. So a lot of people just don't do that. They're just going to jump into starting a business. So then they go here in Florida, our Secretary of State, Division of Corporations website is just sunbiz.org. So you can go on sunbiz.org and just within 5 minutes create a business, but it's literally the bare minimum. There's nothing that goes with it. It's just a name only. And that's what some people do. And then they start, going in business and doing stuff. But one of the things you have to do behind that is if you're a business, you have to have articles of incorporation and bylaws. If you're a corporation, I should say. If you're an LLC, you need to have an operating agreement in place. If you're a partnership, you have to have a partnership agreement. And a lot of people just kind of skip all those steps, get online, do their stuff, and just kind of go gung-ho into business. And that's a common mistake that people make. And that's starting off on the wrong foot. And that's going to lead to a lot of problems down the road.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think especially if there's going to be 2 or more people in the business as partners or, like I said, managing members of an LLC, when you're on your own, yes, it's one thing to not have all the documents, but when you're going to be with someone else, a lot of times I've seen this happen over the years too, where, clients said, well, this is what we agreed on. No, this isn't. We said we were going to do this, and then nothing is documented, and then it brings up problems, right? So do you want to maybe touch on like why it is so important to have all of that, especially if there are 2 or more people in the business?
Sure. Those documents are the roadmap on how you organize and run your business from a business organization standpoint. So if you don't have those documents in place, you don't have the instructions on how to do what happens, how to respond to things, how to go about doing things. And so that's why those documents are so important, because like an operating agreement or bylaws, they tell you how to remove a member, how to add a new member, what to do when you're deadlocked, how you pay people, how you buy things, how you sell things. So if you don't have those documents in place, you're going to have to fall back to whatever your jurisdiction, state statutes or codes say. And that gets pretty complex. And that means you have to have an attorney involved and probably have to go to court because you don't have the documents that say what to do or what not to do. So it's a necessity. It's not a luxury. It's something you should have when you do business. And then particularly when there's more than one person, you have to define what everyone's role is in the business. And you have to define how you can separate or how you can wind down the business. And if you don't have them to document, again, you have to go most likely to court, and it's going to get very expensive, very time consuming.
I do know some people too will say like, oh, well, there's just templates online. It's super easy. You just grab that and fill it out and everything is good, but then I've heard often that those don't really cover everything you need, especially differences in states. So do you want to talk about maybe why it might be better to actually pay an attorney that you can meet face to face to do something versus I'm just going to do it online with a template?
Yeah, the problem with templates is you don't know what's right and what's wrong, because I guarantee the right answer is out there, but I guarantee the wrong answer is out there. And as a layperson, you're not going to understand which one is which. And so you're really at your own risk using templates that you find online, even if they say, oh, here's a Florida LLC template or here's a Florida corporation template, because it's not going to be custom tailored to your specific needs and specific requirements. It's just a general document. So for instance, obviously the best thing you can do is have a business law attorney help you. I guess better than going it by yourself and just doing like a Google search and finding a document. It's like a business, like an online business document preparation company like LegalZoom or Rocket Lawyer or something like that. But I can tell you, I just dealt with this issue yesterday, that those documents aren't always as thorough as you would like, because I had someone come to me where, speaking about multiple people in the business, this is an LLC where they have problems with other LLC members and they want to see what they can do. And unfortunately, the document that they got from a pretty big online document preparation company doesn't say anything about it. So it's as if they don't have the document at all, because I told the person, generally speaking, you have to go to law. You're going to have to file a lawsuit. You're going to have to take care of it that way. And so that's why you really want an attorney to help you draft things, because an attorney would have put that provision in there. And then as the LLC owner or whatever, you would just have to follow that provision, as opposed to having, file a lawsuit and do a bunch of other things.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's where it ends up often being much more expensive, to not have gone and talked to an attorney and had it drawn up specific to your needs, versus doing the template. But I know when people are starting business, they're concerned about what they're going to have to pay out in cash and trying to limit those expenses. But I think seeing this as an investment and protection for their business is something that they really need to think about.
It is. I mean, having a cadre of professionals on your side isn't just a luxury, it's a necessity. And as part of that, you have to have an accountant, you have to have a banker, you have to have like a web person if you're doing internet or technology stuff, and then you have to have a business law attorney who they all act as a team and watch out for your best interests and take care of their specific goals, so that you can just focus on your business. And it's a very proactive approach, and it's a lot of time and money invested on the front end, but you're going to avoid a lot of problems on the back end if you do it that way.
Mm-hmm. So do you want to talk on maybe terms that an entrepreneur should really understand, that maybe they don't even know what it means, or maybe they've heard the word, but they're not quite sure of the definition, but there are some things they probably really need to understand that they can implement in their business that they maybe don't know yet. And this interview will help them understand like what they need to be doing and understanding.
Sure. I mean, most of the terms are going to, you want to say legal jargon, whatever, but they're terms that are used in business and terms that are used in law. I can tell you one very simple term that people misuse every single day because they, I guess, they just don't know better or whatever, is the term partner. Because a partner is someone who is your equal in a business and is part of a partnership, whether it's a limited partnership or a partnership, and there should be a partnership agreement. Just because you're in business with someone doesn't make them your partner. And I run into this a lot with people in corporations and people in LLCs, where there's members in an LLC or there's shareholders in a corporation, and people call each other partners, but that's not the true term that they are. They're really just business associates. And if you use the term partner the wrong way, it has the wrong connotation, because if you're a 90% shareholder and you have a 10% shareholder and you call him or her your partner, now what does that mean? That you're equal partners, or that you're, and you start creating doubt and you start creating a lot of issues. So just a simple term like partner is something that a lot of business owners use incorrectly and could get them in trouble down the road. A lot of other things are, employee versus independent contractor, which is a lot of business owners don't understand what an employee is versus an independent contractor. They just think that one is like a W-2 employee and has to have a W-2, and the other is a 1099 employee, but that's not necessarily true. If you're trying to dummy up someone's employment with you and make it look like they're not a full-time employee, and just call them an independent contractor, but make them work like 35 or more hours a week, generally speaking, that's an employee. So those are terms where if you were to go to either me or I would actually refer you to a specific employment law attorney for specific employment law issues. Those are things where an attorney would tell you that your understanding of the term is actually different than what it is from a legal standard or even a true business application standing.
I've seen that a lot too, as, bookkeeping companies, people will provide, their documentation to us, and they might be paying someone as an independent contractor, but then on the memo, they'll say salary for this period. And it's like, well, a salary is for an employee, right? So you shouldn't be calling it a salary if they're truly independent contractors. But if you're classifying them incorrectly and they should be employees, you need to look at that too. And so I think that's one of the things. I think people think like, oh, well, it's just easier to pay someone as an independent contractor. I don't have to worry about registering and collecting and paying tax. I'm just going to do it that way. And they don't understand that there are very specific guidelines that says when someone should be independent contractor and when they really should be an employee, which most often it's more on the employee side. But do you want to touch on that a little bit more to explain to the listener, like when can you have someone as an independent contractor and when really should they be employees?
Sure. I mean, for the most part, like I said, a lot of people just try to use those terms interchangeably, and they're not really interchangeable because for an independent contractor is someone who is essentially a soldier of fortune who can go do what they want, where they want, and they happen to be doing it with you, for lack of a better term, just to be as simple as possible. So they don't have health insurance benefits. They don't have, retirement benefits that have any of the benefits, but then they also don't have any of the obligations. They're free to move about however they want. They're under no obligation to you other than just owing you like a duty of care or duty of honesty and things like that. But they are independent contractors. They are not part of your organization. They are an outside person who you pay either hourly or on a flat fee. And if you pay them on a flat fee, now you're looking more towards them being an employee. But if you pay them hourly, that's what they do. They're dispensable, for lack of a better term. They shouldn't have a title. They shouldn't be in charge of people. They shouldn't, have certain, access to your bank account or access to your passwords or things like that, because those are indicia of being an employee or a supervisor, which an independent contractor really can't be. So an employee, as we talked about, is someone who receives a salary or gets paid hourly, who receives benefits or receives entire retirement benefits, who you take taxes out for, and who you're responsible for at the end of the year by filing your
The W-2s.
whatever IRS paperwork you need to file. And then they have a title. They have a set responsibility, like you have an employee handbook that describes what your employees do, and they have to abide by that handbook. And they're in charge of people or they're subordinate to people. And there's a way for them to advance their career in your organization. And those are generally what employees would be. So that's what the difference is. And what a lot of people do is because they don't want to deal with the paperwork or they don't want to pay the insurance. They don't want to pay the employment tax or the FICA or anything like that. They just call them an independent contractor. And the problem is that, like I said in my examples, a lot of people are, you call them an independent contractor, but they're an employee. And someday, somewhere, that may catch up with you, whether it's an IRS audit, a lawsuit, a whistleblower action or something like that, where all of a sudden now your whole organization is being scrutinized by third parties, so you really don't want scrutinizing it. And they're going to find out that, you had a whole bunch of people you didn't pay taxes on for the entire existence of your organization, or people who you didn't provide benefits to or things like that. And then you're going to be in real trouble. So that's why if you have someone who's an employee, you need to kind of classify them as an employee. If they truly are an independent contractor, then you can classify them as an independent contractor. But you need to be able to substantiate the facts that I just said to show a third party, whether it's the government, an adverse party in a lawsuit, the law enforcement, whoever, that this person really is an independent contractor, or this person really is an employee.
Yeah, I've shared this a lot, even in my blogs, or I have videos, and I've even done, podcast episodes where I'm trying to explain that too. And it comes down to control, obviously, too, who's in control of the relationship. And I've talked about the IRS guidelines, but there are many states that are even more strict, and my business used to be located in California, and they passed a law in recent years too, that if the person does work that generates revenue for your company, they're supposed to be an employee, right? So if you pay someone to design your website, but in my, field, we're bookkeeping, payroll, things like that, then yeah, that could be an independent contractor. But if you hire someone and they're doing the payroll processing for your staff or for your client staff, they are supposed to be employees. So I think a lot of times people just don't understand the rules and regulations, and that there are very specific guidelines that you have to follow. And so Don't take the easy way out just because you think like, oh, it's too much work to do the paperwork. Because like you said, it can come back and someone could inadvertently file an unemployment claim, right? All of a sudden you have this audit and things too. So I definitely wanted to talk on that because a lot of people just don't understand the ramifications of misclassifying someone. So thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
So I want to also talk about breach of contract because you were talking before too about having documentation for even your partners and things like that too. But when you're dealing with vendors or customers, you could have breach of contract issues as well. So do you want to talk about maybe even define what that means? Because some people may not exactly understand. But then what can an entrepreneur do to make sure that they, first of all, have contracts in place and that they, protect them against breach of contract?
Sure. So obviously, when you're in business, no matter how good you are, no matter who you deal with or whatever, you're going to run into issues at somewhere at some point. And you want those issues to be governed by a contract if possible, because just like those governing documents we talked about for the business organizations themselves, contracts are the roadmap of what guides your relationship with outside parties. So you want everything to be in that contract. First of all, you want a contract. You don't want to just do things on a handshake or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to make things into contract these days. You can make online terms of service a contract. You could make click and, click here to show like anything you can make a contract. You make invoices into contracts, just have the receiving party sign it. And you can make text messages into contracts, have electronic confirmation or have e-signature. So then that way your relationship is governed by terms and conditions. Mm-hmm. And if one side or the other doesn't comply with those terms and conditions, the contract states that you're going to go to court and have a lawsuit, or it states that you're going to go to arbitration or mediation or something like that. So you want to have all of your outside relationships governed by a contract whenever possible. And like I said, it's very easy this day and age to integrate anything in your business, no matter what your business is, into a contract. And then in the contract, you want to make sure that it specifically says what your duties and obligations are to each other and what happens if one side or the other doesn't fulfill their duties and obligations. And you want to make sure that it has like a venue provision for if there's a lawsuit where it takes place, or arbitration or mediation. You want to make sure there's an attorney's fee provision that says that the prevailing party is entitled to their attorney's fees. And you want to make sure that it clearly identifies all the parties. So that's why a contract is a necessity in business, no matter who you're doing business with.
Mm-hmm. Even if it's friends and family, right?
Especially if it's friends and family.
Right, exactly. Do you want to talk about what the definitions really are of arbitration and mediation too? I'm sure people have heard those words, but they may not really understand the difference of that. And then, of course, what happens if that's not working and you do have to pursue other things, or is it set in stone? Does it say in your contract, arbitration is it? Do you want to touch on that maybe just so they can understand?
Sure. So essentially there's three things. There's court, arbitration, and mediation. So in your documents or, your terms and services, whatever you want to say, you can put down that if there's a dispute, you can address it either via mediation, arbitration, or lawsuit. Or if not, and there's no thing and it's silent, then the thing's going to be addressed by a lawsuit. So why you would want to do mediation or arbitration? Well, they're both forms of alternative dispute resolution. So the thinking behind alternative dispute resolution is that it's generally quicker and cheaper than going through the full legal process. So, which may not necessarily be true anymore for the most part, but that's a discussion for another day. So what mediation is when two parties or sets of parties come together, totally voluntary. Everything you do is totally confidential, at least under Florida law and federal law for mediation. And you have a mediator who's an independent person, who's not a judge, who doesn't make findings of fact or conclusions of law. And all they do is they hear one side, they hear the other side, and they try to make both sides voluntarily come together for an agreement that they both agree on, understand, and approve. There's nobody can make you enter into a mediation agreement. No one can make you do anything at mediation. It's totally voluntary. And then if you settle the case or the matter, then you settle the matter. So it's totally voluntary, run by a mediator, etc. Arbitration is kind of like, for lack of a better term, private court. So arbitration, there's a lot of major arbitration companies out there, like the American Arbitration Association, JAMS, and NAM, that run arbitrations. And essentially, arbitration is like a private court. The benefit is supposed to be that it's quicker than regular court because it's very streamlined and very efficient and very fast moving. So in arbitration, what happens is, instead of a mediator who's totally impartial and doesn't make any findings of fact or conclusions of law, you have an arbitrator. You can have a panel of arbitrators with 3, 5, whatever arbitrators, where they're essentially private judges, and they do make findings of fact and conclusions of law. So what happens is, just like in court, you have the plaintiff, who most of the time called the claimant in arbitration, come make their case. Then you have the respondent, who would be called the defendant in the lawsuit, come in and put up all their defenses and everything. And then the arbitrator decides, and the arbitrator writes a award, which is kind of like a judgment, but it's arbitration terms. So they write an award, and then that's the case. Someone either wins or loses or whatever. And then you take the award and you have to confirm it in a court, which just means you file it with the court, and then it becomes the equivalent of a judgment. So that's what arbitration is. The benefits are supposed to be that it's not necessarily cheaper at this point. It's more efficient. And that it gets you resolution. And then, of course, then there's a lawsuit, which is like what you see on TV, the Judge Judy, People's Court, all stuff like that. That's court. That's a lawsuit. There's a winner, there's a loser. You either have a trial or you dispose of it by motion, and then a judgment comes out, and there's someone who wins or someone who loses. And that's it. So those are your 3 versions of dispute resolution, 2 alternative dispute resolutions, and one is the traditional lawsuit.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Well, I know there's so much that could be discussed on this topic, and we're barely scratching the surface, but I know we're coming close to the end of the time we have together today. So I would love to ask, do you have an offer that you would like to share with our listeners? And if someone wants to reach out to you, how can they connect with you?
Sure. So if you go to my website, which is fornarolegal.com, which is my last name, legal.com, there's all kinds of videos, podcasts, white papers, blogs, everything you can imagine that answers most of your generalized business questions at this point. So go there and get all your answers. Or if you can't figure out the answer, you need more help, just contact me. My email, my telephone number's on there. And that's it. If you need to reach me, go to the website, call me, email me.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Matthew, for being a guest and talking on this topic. Like I said, I know it's important for entrepreneurs to understand legal issues that could come up and what they could do to prevent them. So I appreciate your taking the time to chat with me today.
No problem. Thank you for having me, Candy.
And to the listener, if you enjoyed today's topic and you want to hear additional information, you can find access to exclusive content in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guest and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.